Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate everyone joining. This is the first time I've spoken outside of a security arena, and I'm really excited because, as you guys know, everything's shifting left, and there's always a dispute over security responsibilities. So, I'm open. I want to use this as an opportunity to partner with the development community and see how we can collaboratively work together to bring the industry forward. One thing that I want to see here is my B-Sides Orlando 2019. It took me 15 years of industry experience and a bunch of degrees and certifications and conferences to finally step up onto the stage. I wish I would have done it sooner, and I encourage you guys to give back to the community way earlier. Don't wait. Start now. A little bit about me. I know we're short on time. One of the main highlights I just want to give you is in my initial career, I was managing operating environments for the Department of Defense end to end. So I came from essentially a systems engineering DevOps role, transitioning into security. So I've always came from an empathetic perspective where I was very empathetic for the developers and what they needed, transitioning into security, which I think it really enabled me to succeed the way that I've had. Really, and again, one of the things I'll stress throughout this presentation is the relationship building, and my recent promotion to principal this week, and +1 for the docs. So like I started on, one of the key things that I've seen throughout my career and continue to see in every security centric conversation is the responsibility. Whose role is it? And one of the things that a lot of people are still trying to place is the coordinates, and how do we measure where I'm at, where I'm going, and understand the business's needs. If you're the Department of Defense, where you need to go is all the way to the top to prevent nation state attacks. If you're a smaller organization, you may only need to go to an ISO 27000 or whatever the business's approach to security. I think it's key to understanding where the business is and where the business is going. And one thing I won't blab a lot. I'd like to get to the end because I was trying to make this very actionable, where you can take this presentation. I've got a ton of links in and some demo examples that you can copy and paste over to your world and really start making moves on your end of the fence. So one of the things I wanted to do is back into authoritative sources, again, back to the Department of Defense background. If you can't map it to some sort of master framework, it's anecdotal and we don't want to hear it. So the developer and the security community, it's depending on the level of maturity, you could be still finger pointing back and forth. Who owns the code reviews? Who's doing the scanning? Is there any scanning? And what you're seeing is essentially everything's following the code. So one of the GitLab studies and surveys, it was over 4,000 recipients, and developers, over 39% are feeling fully responsible for security. But a lot of times they don't know where to start, where to begin. And there's this friction relationship where in the past security's been, I don't know. I feel like every time I walk into a new org or a new arena, the security it has a bad reputation. So in the past, what I've seen is security guys being more of a policing unit rather than a partner. And I think it takes two to tango, right? So I'm trying to evangelize a change in security culture from the policeman to a partner. And this to the developer community is the same. I'm encouraging you guys, since I'm gonna imagine in the next year or two, half or more of you are going to feel full ownership for security, and you guys need support from the security team and community. So feel free to reach out and start that conversation. Another thing, towards the bottom, a lot of the world that I see is typically dev focused in terms of it's AppSec focused. And a lot of times the infrastructure, for instance, the entire AWS cloud, like you see the S3 public buckets, and then Kubernetes being publicly exposed. some of the core, you can have the application secured to the moon, but if you have access keys committed to code and a public S3 bucket and those access keys tied to an administrator role, your world can be destroyed in minutes. So I want to shed some light on those two layers as well. So the roles and responsibilities, back to that, everything's shifting left. And one of the things when we were promoting up to this event is getting security as far left as we can get it. And when you shift security to the left, really, it's giving more responsibilities to the developers. And in the land before time, the reason I chose the infrastructure platform software as a service diagram on the right here is to highlight where on site in the past, and the land before time example on the left is, in order to get your test stack or your environment up, you needed to have input from an infrastructure guy, a networking guy, program manager was probably involved. So you had the whole community getting that environment up. And, as you go to infrastructure platform and software as a service, everything's codified. And as soon as it hits the code layer, it becomes a developer responsibility. Or, you need to be involved with security or networking, or, this is a constant back and forth that, I want to have an open dialogue with the community on how are we communicating, how are we addressing, and how do we really approach this problem in 2021? You're seeing security as code, infrastructure as code. A lot of infrastructure scanning utilities are coming out, and even baking security scanning capabilities inside the IDE to go, essentially back to the source. I started highlighting this earlier. In the past, the then versus now is throwing requirements over the fence, or punting some vulnerability scan results from Tenable or another tool. Here devs, go remediate these 1,000 vulnerabilities. And then you guys have competing priorities where we've got to get this feature out by a certain date. And then, absorbing those responsibilities blindly, especially from a more of a policeman authoritative approach. I've never seen it work. And I want to change that. And, like I said before, my background is core security engineering. So, instead of, let's use a simplistic antivirus example, instead of giving you guys a binary to implement, harden, tune, make sure the application doesn't have any performance hits, my approach is to break that down into an epic, Jira's, sprint, isolated to work environments. We do the specific testing, automation, to where it's almost it's essentially an internal managed security service, where the more mature the security organization is, the more security becomes abstracted and invisible. Back to the problem. In most larger organizations and even several companies that I've seen, it's almost a 1 to 100 capacity problem. There's no way security can keep up. And that was one of the reasons why I titled this, Security Champions. We need you guys. And I'm not sure the best way to evangelize and get it out to the community, but I'm hoping you guys can help me. I've tried to put as much in this deck as you can to get it and run, but I'm open to improve, tune, and keep presenting to get the word out, because there's just way too many breaches these days. It's ridiculous. Last thing you want to be on the news for is some key access keys you committed and you code reviewed it just to next it. And you miss something that simple. So to the day one security debt, my Department of Defense background, we had to apply a secure configuration baseline to every single piece of the tech stack: operating system layer, database, cloud, application. And typically those configs could be a couple to 300 plus. So if you're deploying, and I did this in the promotion piece, if you're deploying AWS, Kubernetes, a couple operating systems, and a web server, the Department of Defense, for any accreditation, has 1,000 secure configuration settings that you would need to apply to that environment. So going in, setting that environment up, again, shifting left to the developers own it, you're essentially pushing out systems, and that's just configuration. That's not accounting vulnerability. If you're using older containers, older AMIs, older operating systems, you're talking 1 to 2,000 vulnerabilities and secure configurations from day one. And then, when security gets aware, you guys get the responsibility. Now, it's essentially the same as having a bunch of production bugs. Now you have to go fix 1,000 bugs in production. You got to do all the regression testing. It's very laborious and costly versus catching it as far left as you can. So I wanted to get some context and level setting on, how do we know where we're at and where we're going? And it's always been easy for me to consume and communicate in a maturity model. These are some very basic ones. You can see you start out, the one on the left, how good can you do a specific capability? You start out elementary all the way to optimize, and then the one on the right is, it's a elementary or high school grading. Do you have an A, B, C, D, F at this specific function? So transitioning from there, I wanted to take this. Here's a more mature example. The DoD released this within the past, I think, year or two, and they're starting to push it community-wide. And it basically steps up the stack from level 1 to level 5. Are you even doing it all the way up to optimize? And again, not everyone's going for number 5. You may hit 3 and be fine. You may be fine at 2. It's really up to the organization's acceptable level of risk. But the key thing to understand is, what does the organization want, need, and are willing to commit resources to? And I threw together a quick DevOps security model based on the typical language from DevOps, DevOpsSec, DevSecOps, and SecDevOps. And one of the key things that I try to do first is to go straight for a SecDevOps day 0 partnership. Because from my experience, once you establish that key relationship, a lot of the core security capabilities that we're after are mutually shared with the development community. So for instance, blue-green deployments, immutable deployments, those satisfy a ton of security controls, from contingency planning to disaster recovery, configuration management, and a few simple tweaks. You can cover vulnerability management, and we bake a few configuration settings in. Now we have end-to-end auditing, a few more settings. Now you have your password policy. It's starting there, building that relationship, and helping expedite versus slow down has always been a huge win for me. And you kind of skip a lot of the drama and the friction once you start first, have a couple successful projects, and you get security baked in from day one. And one of the core things too, I wanted to throw the marketing piece in, because security, as you're seeing in the news, is becoming a competitive differentiator. And if you guys are starting out at DevOps or DevOpsSec in the first 2 categories, you're not communicating anything. You go to your website, there's no security presence. There's no one on your security team presenting to the community. And, essentially back to the beginning, you're deploying probably thousands of misconfigurations and vulnerabilities out into production. Very risky. And what you need is to drum up more resources. And speaking with security as a competitive differentiator to the business is a good way to start funneling dollars into, if you don't have a specific security resource, it's a good way to communicate up to your manager that, hey, I know we have vulnerabilities. I know we have security issues. If we get to this level X or this security certification, we could break into another market. And, it could help us, you're bringing in revenue for the business versus slowing it down with security. I think I kind of covered some of these. Yeah, specifically. So, just to highlight it again, some of the systems that we use for penetration tests just to play around and experiment with new tools are environments with, they're a couple month old Windows systems. If you look at Windows trends, if you guys are using any Windows systems, every month 5 to N critical vulnerabilities. Most are remote code execution. In each Windows secure configuration guidance, you're probably 300 plus configuration settings. So hundreds to thousands of vulnerabilities. And from speaking from the business perspective, if you're at the lower level of maturity, just getting code out the door quickly. If you're a healthcare organization, you have to support HIPAA. If you're doing global business, you need to support GDPR. So, if your company's trying to penetrate into larger market space, it's a good way to communicate and get resources. Kind of covered this too. I may skip through this. I know we're short on time here to get to more of the practical, actionable stuff. But again, here, what I've seen too, if you're at this level, your security's just getting involved. There's friction. There's disputed roles and responsibilities. Who's owning what? Again, you're not at the partnership level, so there's contention everywhere, and the process is band-aided. You get the product out, security comes in, and then does penetration testing or final scans before a go live, and finds obviously a bunch of vulnerabilities or configuration issues. Now there's even more friction on, we've done our all of our regression testing. We're ready to ship the product. Now security wants us to change, these 10 things, or, again, doesn't work. So DevSecOps, this is the common term that you're hearing everywhere. It's to the point where security is baked in everywhere. And, a lot of it's starting to hit as far left as the IDE. And I'll touch a little bit in the end here where there's some tools that scan code in real time. There are container scanning tools. So if you're building in that environment, you'll know before you even need to push your Docker file up or build your container that, again, it's back to the awareness. When you have an open JDK container that you were bound to an older version, now before you push that up, you already know you're carrying some higher critical vulnerabilities, and it's much easier to fix versus blindly pushing it all the way out to production. Now you have a whole stack running this higher critical vulnerability, and you have to fix it and roll it all the way back out to the end. And we're starting to become a team, and we're out into the community talking about it, building more and more. And then SecDevOps is this reminds me of the federal days where security's it's invisible, it's abstracted, and the business is proud of it. It's a competitive differentiator. We have we're standing on top of the security mountain. And this is one of the key projects that I've done at RMS. It's called the Image Factory, where, for instance, a lot of AMIs, the community just pulls them from a secure account. They don't need to worry about compliance. It's security certified. It's totally abstracted. Some of their auto scaling groups point to ours. The AMI IDs, they automatically pull. They don't need to worry about that entire layer. So what we're doing is we're accelerating both entities where you guys no longer have to focus on that entire layer. And, we're working our way all the way up the stack where, the developers, we're trying to give them the opportunity to focus on what their mission is. And same for us. One of the solutions, and I don't know the audience here. I'll try and keep this as simply complex as possible. But this is tried to do a very lightweight example of some of the solutions that I was just mentioning. Where if you're from, so the CM-3, IA-5, these are NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology reference controls. Every single federal system is mapped to this framework, and they've released a cybersecurity framework for the private sector that is a smaller subset, but it's essentially that core framework. And back to using this as a mutually beneficial opportunity for the developer and the security team to, I kept quoting it is get the pesky auditors off your back, where these things need to be satisfied from a lot of these controls I listed here. it doesn't matter if you're ISO, your HIPAA, your FedRAMP, your GDPR. If you don't have these fundamental, like number 5, RA-5 vulnerability monitoring and scanning, it's going to be applicable to every, essentially it's table stakes to play the game at this point. So I'll walk left to right. If you have your code configuration controlled in GitHub, you do PR reviews, you do branches, development, staging, production, promotion process, satisfy a bunch of security controls. Easy win. Again, it's just communicating on the same language as the audience, where hopefully here with these, and I also list the NIST document to map into, a lot of it you can copy paste. Say, yes, if a security audit comes and maybe it's thrown over the fence, you're still in the DevOpsSec stage, you can actually easily address it. Or maybe, since the responsibilities are shifting so fast and the traditional security role didn't have as much hands-on experience, again, you have to carry the burden, but it's much easier for the owner of the code, the one who's familiar with the system, to speak to this intelligently. Where, if I came in blind just from, an audit or checklist perspective, I don't even understand what any of this means. So essentially this, we have an Azure DevOps pipeline, a Packer file committed. It's hooked into an Azure DevOps pipeline. We're using Packer, to build an AMI against a standard baseline configuration. And then when you hit number 4, we're launching, again, back to instance type. You can hook into performance and availability there as well. And I put the Band-Aid on it there's a simple apt-get update command, and I'll just do a quick. So if you go to my repository, in the end, it has the basic Azure Pipelines file, the commands we're running, and essentially this simple one-liner. Every time you're building an AMI, if you're doing apt-get update upgrade for a Linux instance, you're effectively meeting the vulnerability management control. And another addition that we have here is after this is built, we also hook it into a vulnerability scanning process. So not only do we build it, update it, we have the scanning evidence that's pushed out to a compliance repository. So we could essentially say we're compliance as code too. And a lot of the security as code is starting to get subsets like vulnerability management, compliance. So, I know it doesn't take too much to add a call, an API call to the security product, and then another API query to pull the report, push it to a compliance S3 bucket. Now they don't even need to look or bother you. It's straight here. You need to see what we're doing. Go check out the compliance S3 bucket. And then I put this in an auto scaling group. And now, if you can speak to the auto scaling group, hey, for our product, we have N number of instances, and once the CPU hits 80% for more than 2 minutes, we have a CloudWatch rule that triggers N number of horizontal scaling. Okay. So from there, this Sneak is a very popular security scanning tool. I just wanted to show a simple scanning option for you guys and an IDE. If we just go to the vulnerability scanner, let me get this out of here. They have well documented, easy to set up. And then, as what it does is it hooks into your Docker files that are in your repository, and then it pulls up the vulnerabilities within them. And then they have the same thing for Java and TypeScript, to where, if it detects any specific vulnerabilities, it'll give you a pop-up in real time. So again, back to the whole shift left. If you find this here while you're typing it, way better than remediating through 3 stages and all the way out into production. Another thing too, back to the cloud layer, AWS has an easy tool. It's called Trusted Advisor. If you log in, let's see if I have it up here. if we go into AWS services, I mean, it's as simple as logging in here and hitting refresh. Zoom's blocking me here 1 second, but literally come in, hit refresh, and it does a bunch of common security checks. You know, and what do my security groups look like? MFA, any public S3 buckets or snapshots, and it has downloadable reports. So very easy to use tool. And then if you have a premium subscription, it unlocks a bunch of other features that, you know, from performance to security, very convenient feature to use quickly. One thing too, back to the Department of Defense secure configuration guidance is so STIG is a secure, it's a secure configuration benchmark basically. And all of their tools, not all of them, but a substantial amount are available for public download. And they're very easy to use now. The product's matured a lot. And I've done a sample export for you guys. I can show you real quick. So essentially, you can download the STIG viewer. I have the link in the slide. And then you can do file import STIG. And the library link that I put in there is about a 200 megabyte zip file. And like I was mentioning before, depending on your technology stack, from Active Directory to Adobe Reader, Apache, and you can skim through. There's Ubuntu 18.20, switches, container platforms. I mean, there's another one for Docker. There's Kubernetes. I mean, it gives you a good base outline for what you need to do to secure your systems accordingly. So we have 93 total. And if we filter on a category 1, which is a sub 1, we're down to 15. And it's very easy to read actionable data you get here. So of these, they give you the rule, the discussion, and how to check for it. So, I mean, a lot of this can be scripted too. You know, if you have 93 settings, you can copy and paste this in a shell script and run it on your server fairly quickly. And then on to the export. If you look at the export, it's again, it's fairly easy to consume and filter and prioritize. One of the things I want to know, and I know we're starting to run out of time, so I'll accelerate here, is back to the NIST 853 control mapping. If there are multiple frameworks that your company is meeting, this is a good central check. And if you go to the other link that I provided, this is the 853, it's the entire NIST control set. They map it to ISO 27001. So if we go back to the finding here, AC-3, you can see it's access enforcement. And if you're using ISO, you can map it to all of your ISO controls. You know, so again, back to the security auditor, if they're coming to you for a specific, hey, what does my access enforcement look like? Or AC-3, or we're trying to solve AC 14-1.2, you can map it here through the STIG and speak intelligently to them. I did a quick, this was my 1,000 or 1,100 example for you guys initially. You know, some common technologies being used out here, and the severity category. You know, depending on where you are, maybe you might be following the CIS, the Center for Internet Security benchmark, if you're a private sector, but at least take a look at, you know, some of the sub ones. A lot of these are public facing or least privilege administrative type role controlling here. So take a look there. We covered the mapping. So on that site as well, there's free operating system scanning tools that ingest those benchmarks. So for Windows, Ubuntu, Red Hat, and some applications, you download it, run an executable, do the same import, just like that viewer, run it, and it spits out a pretty report against all of those settings. On top of that, they have great, so DoD has changed a lot in the past few years, and they are fully on board with DevSecOps, and they're really pushing the envelope and they have a couple great documents on an end-to-end process. So depending on where you're at and where you're going, from just getting started all the way up to if you're a mature, high-performing team, this is a great reference. Same with NIST. NIST has some, again, it's back to the technology stack. If you're looking to harden a specific piece of technology, the Department of Defense or NIST has some prescriptive or generalized guidance. And this is mapped to the cybersecurity framework I mentioned earlier. And these go back to NIST controls that you can map to ISO or any other compliance framework you're using. We covered the DoD Kubernetes export. And again, back to authoritative guidance. If you guys are using a local Kubernetes or you're using EKS, I recommend looking at their documentation, because Amazon's docs are always beautiful. I've got the links in there. I won't scroll through it, but here's a couple high-level categories. And they also have some hands-on scanning guidance. There's a tool called KubeBench that runs a Kubernetes deployment, and it scans some core configurations. So between this initial link, and I put it in there too, it's 42 minutes in the EKS. It's like a couple minute guide, and you guys can go in, install this app, and scan your Kubernetes clusters. We did it. We made it. So, during all of these tough times, I try to focus inward on yourself too. I know it's easy to get caught up in work, and, now that we're remote, I've managed to do 60, 70-hour weeks, trying to disconnect, because when you're running at rev limiter like that, it's hard to maintain your maximum performance. So take care of yourself. Appreciate you guys listening, and please give me feedback. Like I said before, this was my first outreach to the developer community. So let me know how we can improve and get better together. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.